Hey guys, Mustached Tom here to review the remake of Lilo and Stitch. So, obviously, this is a remake of the Disney movie, of the animated variety, which has been something that Disney has now just gone through a good chunk of its Disney era, and is now moving past the ushering in past the Disney princess era, in which Lilo and Stitch was very much the beginning and end of that sort of transitional period of where Disney was heading at that time. So, I would argue that this movie, the original, that being, it was one of the best Disney movies, in that it changed the way that Disney was moving, but in a positive direction. You see, change can be scary, and a lot of times playing it safe is very much preferred, aka the remakes, by their very nature, are very safe. This remake is now safe, as in the original was not. It was a new concept, new idea, and a new sort of chaotic energy system idea going on. No more Disney princesses being the prim and proper and all of that stuff. Just absolute chaos. And that's what Stitch embodied as early as his early promos, with interfering with other Disney characters. That was his gimmick. I would actually argue this, and it's an interesting argument. I think it's never going to happen, by the way, this idea. I think Stitch should be the new face of Disney, and I'm not joking. If I were the owner of Disney, that's what I would have done when Lilo and Stitch came out. And here is the specific reason. Mickey Mouse, which is the face of Disney, wasn't made by Disney. It was bought by Disney. That is where a lot of that stuff comes from, is, Disney sort of beginning that conglomerate attitude, even if there was a lot more, even if there was, that arguable more heart behind it as well. But there was still that power grabbing happening back in the day. So yeah, Mickey Mouse is bought. It's not originally Disney, if anyone knows Disney history. But Stitch is original Disney. He's an original Disney character. I think Stitch should have been the face of Disney moving forward since 2000 or 2, or wherever Lilo and Stitch the original came out. That's never happened. Now, a franchise did branch off of Lilo and Stitch's success, but Stitch hasn't become the face of Disney. It's still Mickey Mouse. You still see the ears pop up everywhere for Disney's brand. And again, I think it should have been Stitch. But now we have the remake. And while I would still argue that Stitch should still be the face of Disney, I think this remake is, in a nutshell, have been the issue of, every Disney remake, or if not most of them. That being, where is the heart, and where is the adaptation? Because I think these two things are fighting each other in this movie consistently. At every corner in this movie, from beginning to end, spoilers I guess, for this movie, even though if you've seen the 2000 movie, you kind of have seen this, in a way, despite all the changes that this movie also makes, which are, dare I say, both challenging and new, but also safe and standard, I guess? It's weird. So we'll dive into that. So yeah, here we are being as objective as possible. Let's begin. So of course we begin in space. And here we have the immediate problem, and it's the consistent problem throughout the live-action movie. The movie is wanting to move way too fast. The movie is not willing to digest a scene for too long for us to get accustomed to. So we have the opening scene as an example where Stitch is brought out and Jumba are also brought out. Visually speaking, I think he looks fine. Though, I would argue, he sounds worse than Chris Pratt voicing Mario. I'm not sure why they chose the voice actor for this guy, for Jumba. He doesn't even attempt to do a Jumba impression area. Like, it's so far removed. I'm like, and everyone's pointed this out, at least from the reviews I've seen so far, that Jumba sounds so far removed. It's like, did you seriously not hear what the character sounded like, or were you too scared to mimic sort of this gruffer Russian voice type of deal for Jumba? It's like, were you really that scared? It's like, come on. Again, Lilo and Stitch was always about chaotic energy. It was about pushing boundaries. And, you would think at this time they would maintain something of that to pay tribute to the actor who had passed away. I don't know, that just seems like something you would do. But hey, it's Disney. No, instead we're gonna not only replace the actor, but we're gonna make him sound completely different. It just feels off. And it doesn't sound like Jumba, more importantly, more than anything else. Even if you took away the Russian accent, even if he doesn't even sound gruff, which, based on Jumba's size and stature, you would think he would have an intimidating voice, and he doesn't even come across as a scientist a lot of the times because of this as well. There's no sense of this maniacalness behind his voice, which also causes problems later on, because I don't buy him as the villain of this movie at all, which, by the way, comes with one of the massive changes that everyone else has pointed out, and was pretty obvious even in the trailers, that Gantu was going to be cut from this movie. There was no way they were going to CGI a gigantic whale shark, I think he was, moving around for as many scenes as he was in the original. I don't think that they would pay that much money. I mean, they were trying to have Jumba and Pleakley in human disguises. They were trying to do the opposite. They were trying to save money, and, a lot of that early CGI work clearly went toward the opening scene and the aliens there. But, getting back to the pacing issue, is that they immediately stuff him from that room to the room that you see him captured in. Now, this does happen pretty quickly in the opening, but we kind of see the transitional shot from him being brought there. Here, he's literally just shoved down one tube and he's in that room. And then he figures out how to escape that quickly, as he did in the original, with the spit being the same thing, and getting out. Again, there's this feeling of rushing the pacing of the movie in order for us to move along. And this will track all throughout the movie, that the pacing is one of the bigger issues of the movie, especially when this movie has to deal with heart. Again, something that I brought up prior in this review. But I digress. We need to move along. So of course, we cut as we're transitioning over to Hawaii with the traditional opening, and I'm glad that they at least kept all the songs while adding in one new one that seems completely out of place. Again, very Elvis-oriented, and to not have an Elvis song be the one that you're partying to just seems a little bit odd, that you would just throw in some other artist that you have brought the music rights from, or whatever, however that works in the ways. But yeah, Stitch's arrival is slightly altered here, that being him interacting with more humans, which I do think is another mistake. I mean, part of what makes Lilo and Stitch work is that he is conceived as, when we actually see him through Lilo's eyes, perceived as a dog. Now there are people who are seeing him that are like, was that like a talking whatever it is? It's like, that shouldn't be happening. And again, this idea does kind of break away from what happens at the end of the movie as well, because there's sort of this weird acceptance of like, oh, they're just an alien ship coming down now, where everyone was like, you know, even in the original movie, everyone was like, oh, they're, like, something's happening, clearly. So anyways, so as we see the hula begin, Lilo is slightly shoved, so she shoves the girl back, and is thus kicked from the, or she just sort of leaves, also knowing that Nani didn't get there in time. And again, it feels like we are rushing here once again. We get to get a little bit of who Myrtle is and how much of a jerk she is in the original animated version. And again, we have these little interactions with the other little girls that hang around Myrtle. Here, we kind of just skim past this, and we really don't see much of them throughout the rest of the movie. I think there's like one other time we see them in this adaptation, if I'm not mistaken. Anyways, now there's a separate social worker, if you've seen all the trailer bits, as well as just Cobra Bubbles just being a CAI agent rather than being both of these things, which I also find baffling, but more so baffling what they do to Nani, in giving her a neighbor and having the neighbor take some of Nani's positions, which is even more disrespectful to Nani as a character. It's like, Nani had a lot going on in the original, and it's like, why would you want to take that away from her? You're not removing her character, so why would you remove the things that she does in the original movie? That doesn't even make any sense. The whole social worker CIA agent split, I'm actually not even that upset about this one. Dare I even suggest that it kind of makes logistical sense that the CIA agent would be a separate entity and then would work its way into the social role to get closer to the hints that just so happen conveniently all throughout the movie, which, you know, is still an issue, but I mean, and just in terms of character, I don't mind the separation as much. I think that was something was also sort of harped on in other criticisms as well. So anyways, so obviously as when the social worker does arrive, giving her a few days to make this whole situation work out. She needs these 3 things, in which I did not write down, to have Nani do in order to keep Lilo at her side. And the neighbor, as I mentioned, she's around, and David also is around at this juncture. And this is where Lilo begins to feel like she is a bad individual when she's at home, but then watches the green meteor passing down and makes that wish. And again, even the pacing here, once again, feels a little bit too rushed. Like, they want to get Nani out of the room. There's that bit where she's like weighing down the Lilo in the original animated version, and having Lilo wish, which, I think the acting here is a little bit, it needed to feel a little bit more desperate, and, a new actor, a new child actress in particular, I get that can be a challenging thing to do, to get to come across, but then again, at the same time, I've seen child actresses and actors from other countries absolutely kill when they need to do emotional scenes. So I think this one's a bit more on the direction rather than her in this case. And again, I don't think she's given enough time to let out all of her emotions. And again, this is a consistent issue throughout the movie, particularly with both Lilo and Nani in particular, is that every scene with them feels like it's sort of go, 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 never sit, 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 sit. And that is what made Lilo and Stitch work. It's all the scenes where we get to sit. All the scenes where the chaos subsides. The bench scene in particular is a scene we'll get to. And there's a reason I want to point to that, because I think that is the essence of where this movie fucks up everything. Outside just the pacing. So anyways, so Stitch still has his shock collar on, which is also a collar that gives away his location, and he proceeds to remove it, and then crashes the wedding party that has the song from, I forget the name of the song. It's not an Elvis song, so it's like, okay, that seems a little bit out of place, but here we go. And then he gets hit by a bus, which is changed from the 3 trucks that brutally run him over. And again, I feel like they try to slightly alter this, and it's further worse. Again, Stitch is now being caught by several people, being seen by several people, rather than him sneaking all the way into the dog kennel by himself. I think that would, again, fit a lot closer to where we need to be. So yeah, obviously we go over to Pleakley and Jumba, who take on the human disguises, which, I don't mind. Though again, the actor for Jumba it doesn't have the voice anyway. But yeah, they open the portal, this portal, it's like a portal gun, essentially, that also has a blaster on it, essentially. So, obviously, they're now hunting Stitch. And this is where Stitch meets Lilo. Now, initially, in the original, this is where Nani and her are in the kennel, and they buy Stitch. This is crucial in the original movie. There's this whole bit about, in the end of the original movie, where it's all about how aliens respect the laws above all else, how that is, seen, and it's that very certificate that Lilo pulls out in the original and says, hey, I bought Stitch, he's mine. That would mean you're stealing. That whole bit is gone. And I'm like, what the fuck are they gonna do? How did they remove one of the most crucial parts of the ending, in which they have a completely different ending, because now Jumba is also a bad guy, and they're going to change something else as well. It's like, you're changing 3 massively different things, and you really thought that that was going to turn out well for you, Disney? I mean, I guess if a lot of people go to see this movie, which I'm guessing is going to happen, I mean, it still is Lilo and Stitch, which, is still going to bring in the people who loved the original Lilo and Stitch will probably still see this anyway as a sign of good faith that their beloved remake wouldn't be the one that gets destroyed this time. But no, here we go again. So yeah, this is where Cobra is introduced, and he sees the ship, and he is not in the movie much. Now that is the issue about splitting his character, is that they now have removed a little bit of his characterization as well. And again, I just don't feel like a lot of his lines, I think one of his lines kind of like had my attention, like, oh, that actually did sound like something Cobra would say, and how he would say it. And that only existed once in this movie. Once. That's never good. Your character should be like, I should be pointing to that character and saying, that was a good version of Cobra, that was a good version of Lilo, that was a good version of Nani, that was a good version of this and that and the other. But no, instead I'm going, there was this one moment where it felt like he was the most like Cobra. That's just bad, man. Come on. How did they fuck up this bad? So, I don't remember the exact, like, line that Nani brings up where she mentions something about a Stitch. This is now, because they're now moving this scene about where Lilo names Stitch to the car, and Lilo says, that's it, that's his name. And it's like, okay, you didn't, again, why did you change it from the kennel? You would think you would come up with the name there. That seems like the logical place to name your dog and adopt your dog is you naming your dog and buying your dog. I don't know. That sort of all seems to come together, and now it just seems like you just bought a random dog, a random unnamed blue dog. And it's like, did these people, like, not care about, like, doing the bare minimum? It's like, I get it. Like, okay, look, I'm gonna level with you. Again, it comes down to what do you change versus what you keep the same. I get removing Gentoo. To me, that makes sense. Where you take Jumba, by extension of doing that, is the consequence, though. Where I'm a little bit more on the fence on that, because I do think that you lose a bit of his character as a consequence on top of him in his journey. What doesn't make sense is when you reorient scenes that don't need to be reoriented. Again, Stitch being named at the kennel just makes logical sense. That's where you bought him. That's where you would name him, most likely. And that was a pretty fun bit about, Lilo naming the dog just randomly out of nowhere, Stitch, something a child would very likely do. The owner being like, that's probably not a good name, and Nani being like, hey, no, let Lilo name the dog. That whole bit tells us character about Nani, and that's all gone. And it's like, what are you doing? Why are you removing character traits? Why are you removing these bits that are so interesting? And it's like, okay, I get that you want to add in this whole marine biologist aspect to her character. That's good, but at the expense of removing the caring for Lilo aspect is where I get lost, because that is the Ohana part of it. You lost, like, a good chunk of that at the beginning of the movie. It's like, so, like, do I need to believe that they are more or less siblings, or now that Nani is more of a mother, quote-unquote, as the movie literally tries to suggest at a later point in the movie? It's like, that never needed to be that part, it needed to be the thing in the original movie. Anyway, so obviously Jumba tracks the car with an unconscious human clean him being in a human disguise. And David sees Lilo, and this is where they reach the luau, the fire torch scene. Now, again, this is an adaptation thing that I think actually works. Wow! It's like if we're all over the place. Now it's not anyone on the human side that is making the mistake. You know, we have all the fire professionals and, you know, it has that competence up there, but now you have Stitch, who kind of sneaks up on stage, takes the torches and leaves, and then tosses one of the torches and it burns the rest of the stage. That, to me, is a better, smaller, contained adaptation. And, you know, how that all sort of correlates back to them getting, you know, Nani getting fired since she worked there. But again, at the sacrifice of Nani's character, again, there is this moment, there are so many of these great little moments you notice in the original movie about, like, what Nani says about working there in order to, you know, sort of protect Lilo in this way. Look out for Lilo. Again, more like a sister rather than a mother. Again, these lines feel very, very tight in the original movie, looking back at it. So obviously, they go through a montage of them going through the other job applicants and trying to get hired. You have, like, Stitch being trained, and this is where we see the goodness chart brought up, which they brought that up in the house. Now they're bringing it outside, which feels a little bit random that it would be outside rather than inside, but okay. Not sure how they got that out there, but I don't know, again, seems a bit weird. And of course, Nani being attached to these two means that getting a job is significantly harder. So obviously the last surfing job comes into question. Now, this time around, for those of you who have not seen the original, you know, this is their big final one, right? Their big final moment. Cobra's in the distance, he's watching them, and they're, you know, out surfing, and she's also, like, job training there, as a part of it, and she's looked like she's doing good. Okay, everything looks like it's doing good. And then it immediately falls apart. And it's like, okay. So, you know, if you have the whole bit where Stitch wants to get out, you know, get on the board. And, you know, you have all these nice moments of, like, Jumba sees this, because they're in the distance, and we cut away to them, too, in the original movie. And we hear a lot about how Jumba is feeling about Stitch. And this, to me, is a good, you know, contrast here, because we don't get any of that. We just get Jumba and Pleakley just attempting to capture them, or Stitch rather in particular, and they get spotted, which is an interesting change, because they go unseen in the original, and Stitch is the one that's blamed. Here, the humans actually spot, you know, these two coming after Stitch, here this time around. So Stitch is no longer, you know, to blame necessarily, and Stitch falling in the water and then trying to get back up, and Lilo and dragging Lilo back down. But of course, you know, having all of that get circumvented, and rather than all of that, you know, Jumba and Pleakley get, like, blasted off. And now we have this sort of gap here that feels like, again, a bizarre cut, because they cut the ugly duckling portion of the story, which, you know, I actually get this one. I know that's going to surprise some people, but I get this one. It's weird that I get it, but I get it. But here's the problem now, is that Stitch kinda doesn't feel like he needs to leave. the whole Stitch leaving here part now doesn't feel earned. There's nothing, ushering him to leave the family. I mean, he wasn't blamed as he was in the original. He just sort of walks off on it, while Nani and Lilo this time around both sing the scene where they are getting ready to say goodbye to one another. And this, to me, is the pinnacle of fucking it all up. Again, now you have removed Stitch's, feeling like this unknown, like, I don't know where I belong aspect of his whole character is just gone in this movie, by the way. It never feels like he feels lost. He never says that in the movie. There's nothing to get him there. I think there could have been another way outside of the ugly duckling story to get Stitch to reach the I'm lost line. I think that would have made a lot more sense, and while having Stitch still be blamed here for their little event. Obviously, you have to rigmarole the entire scene differently, but again, that compromises the entire point of Stitch being lost. Again, that's just gone in this version, which, again, now is just Stitch leaving for an unknown reason. It literally is an unknown reason. It's like they literally did not know what to do because they didn't want to put the burden on Stitch. That's what it feels like, what just happened in the writing here, is like they didn't want to put the burden on Stitch, and they didn't want to have, Stitch feel guilty. They didn't want any of that. They just wanted a cute and little fluffy little guy. And I would know this because they bring up the cute and fluffy line at the end of the movie, but they don't have the context of that earlier in the movie. That's how I know that that's the reason. Or at least that's, I'm able to kind of put together the reason of, like, where that idea kind of comes in. At least from when I'm looking at it. So yeah, for whatever reason, again, the unknown reason, Stitch goes back to the kennel for some reason, while Lilo and Nani both sing the song. And not that I don't mind Lilo joining in on the song, the problem is the song is too fast this time around. The scene is way too fast. They don't have any time to, like, this is the goodbye scene. This is the emotional, curve of the entire movie that brings us to the finale. And it's rushed. It's rushed surprisingly even faster than Snow White. And it's like, how did they fuck up that bad? How did they fuck up this tremendously that the emotional heartbeat of this movie is just cut in, like, by this large amount of section? So yeah, the scene is rushed, and by that extension, every bit of it that needed to feel that heart is gone. In fact, the whole Ohana means family, family means no one gets left behind, even as early as the trailers indicated that this was going to be sort of a, like, almost a gag line where, again, Nani gets hit by the refrigerator. You see that in the trailer. It's like, that's not a place to put a joke. Like, and I know someone else pointed this out, and I'm going to point it out as well. Did the terrible Marvel humor of writers just infect, like, everything in Disney now, particularly in this movie? Because it feels like it did. And what I mean by this is that there are these emotional lines that should be happening, these emotional moments, and you undercut them with a joke. And it's like, you have time for jokes, guys. I get that Lilo and Stitch is there's a lot of comedy in this movie. There is. I get it. But there's also a lot of heart. and it feels like more than half of the heart is just completely cut. For what? For more jokes. And it's like, why? If anything, the movie split between comedy and heart is so close that it's like a chain. It's like this unbroken chain in the original movie. You feel one and you feel the other. Here, in the remake, it's like the comedy is engulfing the heart. And that's the problem with this movie. The comedy comes at the expense of the heart. And that, to me, is what really ruins this entire movie. I mean, I'll go over the rest of this, but I just think that that is the penultimate come away with in Soa's watching this movie. So yeah, Lilo just happens to find Stitch, and Lilo now repeats the line that she said that was repeated to her to Stitch, which revolves around something, this alternative family line, which that I, felt was a little nice, one of those few, very, very few good add-ons of like, okay, there's a little something extra there. But then again, we move right into it, again, because that scene is still rushed as all heck, that the Stitch then moves throughout the house, brought back to the house. Portal Gun and Jumba make their way there. And the house is simultaneously getting destroyed because it also has the blaster on it. And then you have Pleakley arriving on the scene, getting arrested. The people, and here's like the weird add-on, right? Is now we're gonna have the penultimate, Stitch versus Lilo and all that. Jumba uses these words to convince Stitch that he should give up. That he was just utilizing Lilo. And to me, it doesn't feel earned. Like, you didn't do enough in the movie to have this come across. And it's because everything is happening way too quickly. You didn't earn any of this. You didn't earn any of the new material now that, you can't have, Hagantu running around. To have Jumba be the villain, but just talk his way to Stitch and convince Stitch that he should leave. It's like, again, where is Stitch's character? This doesn't feel, again, there's a breach. There's a complete hole in Stitch's character. It's completely gone from this movie. It's so obvious. So yeah, Pleakley ends up getting arrested, and, Jumba takes Stitch away. Lilo sneaks on the ship while Pleakley gets, harangued by the other humans who aren't even freaked out that he's an alien, which is okay. You have the emotional little shock moments in the original movie, even when it regards to Stitch, when they first arrive, right? You have him when he's opening the fridge and closing the fridge and Nani sees it, and she's like, ugh, at the beginning of it, right? All of that, again, where's that? Where's that aspect of Nani that's, freaked out about this? She seems more annoyed than anything else that this is happening in her life right now. And again, it feels like there's this condensed version of Nani that exists in this movie now, by that extension. Now there's this fear that this mysterious gremlin, which Stitch should be, is just wreaking havoc, or, mysteriously in places he shouldn't be in, doing things that seem a little bit odd, out of the ordinary, by a dog standard. All of these things ought to exist, but now they do not. So yeah, the humans give chase as the ship lands in the water. Nani goes back into the water because both Stitch and Lilo get out, and the ship dives into the water. Lilo gets out, but Stitch lets go, doing the little symbol he learned from Lilo, which is like the only thing that they set up earlier in the movie that feels slightly earned, I guess. And having Stitch repeat it. But then, again, it simultaneously doesn't, because, again, because the whole transitional phase, it still being a montage, even the montage feels fucked up when I have to say this. Him transitioning from being the bad dog to the good dog doesn't feel earned, because we don't get that we don't get Lilo, like, harking on Stitch, and Stitch feeling bad. That's the core that's missing here. That's the piece that is missing here in this entire section, is that there's no fighting, there's no bickering, there's no brother and sister bickering, which is what Lilo and Stitch would be, was in the original movie by that extension. These two unrelated chaos gremlins and an older sister. That's Lilo and Stitch. That is what that movie was. That is what broke it from the Disney princess era. And granted, I get that Mulan technically also broke that trope while then being sold as a Disney princess regardless, but that's a whole other issue. But it's like, you have all of this. You have this chaotic family that is so far removed from anything close to even, dare I even suggest, Mulan. I mean, two completely separate movies. You have a movie about this woman who, was defined by her femininity and, being in that traditional sense of what it meant to be this perfect Chinese daughter, to be forced to be in this war and to, take on the identity of being a man, what it meant to be a man, all of these trans things that we, if I dare use that word today, all of these sort of trans categories that we can sort of slot into that now that we have that word to sort of guide us by today's diction of new and fascinating words, dare I say. But it was all about that. It was all about breaking the gender norms and breaking this idea that, you needed to be this. But what's so fascinating about Mulan, and side tangent I guess, is that despite that, she still holds on to enough of her femininity while taking on a little bit more masculinity. That's the point of Mulan. Embracing that other side, embracing the yin and yang, speaking culturally speaking, that seems like that sort of fits, even though I think yin and yang is a more Japanese thing. I'm actually not sure if that's Japanese or Chinese, actually, if I'm being completely honest, or something completely else. But I digress. Point being is that by comparison, Lilo and Stitch is more so about two chaos gremlins, these two chaos gremlins. One adopted for all sakes and purposes, and the other who's just an odd little sister. Two chaos gremlins being trying to be taken care of by this older sister who is way over her head and is trying her best, but is, put to too much to task, but is still trying her best. And that was Lilo and Stitch. And to me, all of that seems lost when Stitch doesn't even feel like a chaos gremlin as much. I mean, sure, you have him throw a large disc at a car, but it's like, but he's never reprimanded enough. He's not, he's not hounded, he's not challenged, despite being a chaos gremlin. That's the part that's missing. There's still something that's missing. It doesn't feel like it earns its place of Stitch wanting to become good, but still being a little bit chaotic. That's the part that's missing. That's the part. You're missing Stitch's journey, is what I'm trying to explain here, in an over-explained sort of way. So, yeah. So Nani pulls Stitch back in. They start Stitch back up to life. And this is where the Grand Council woman arrives. And here we have a re-altered scene of where Stitch says that he wants to say goodbye, and, the Grand Councilwoman just says, Stitch needs to be punished. His exile will just be on Earth. She just comes to that conclusion on her own will, I guess, in this adaptation, which is fucking weird. And, there's none of that whole CIA agent Cobra Bubbles was this guy from before. All of that's cut too, by the by. While, Bleakley wants to volunteer to stay here, which is also changed from the original. They were left behind very much on purpose, but Jumba is the one who gets captured up this time. So everything about the ending is different, and it's like, you didn't earn that ending at all. I'm sorry. That just kind of happens, and it just ends the movie, and it's like, you didn't earn that ending whatsoever. You just forced your way into that ending. You just had the Grand Councilwoman just, you know what, the movie's ending, fuck it, you get to adopt Stitch. It's like, you missed the point. I like the bit. Why did you remove the bit? It's so good. It's such a good little bit. It's like, aliens respect the law. It's such a phenomenal bit. It's like, you have a comical ending just hand-delivered to you, and you fucking remove it. It's like, why? Because it also had heart? Is that why? Is that the reason? Because it seems like all the heart is fucking gone. And what's replaced is this oversaturation of comedy where it doesn't need to be, in the scenes of like, the Hana means family, boop! We're just gonna lock that line now. It's like, we're just gonna rush all the other lines that feel, emotionally linked, like them singing their cute little song. The emotional heart of the entire movie, we're just gonna rush that one. We're just gonna rush it, but no need to sit with anything. This is a 3 out of 10, if anything, or 4 out of 10 at best. I'm not sure why you would give this a 6 out of 10. I don't think it deserves it. There's just too much that this movie took away. And didn't, for all the changes it attempts, it fails at all of them. Fucking all of them. None of them make any sense. Jumba's in space, like, Jumba's character is just completely altered. I don't know how they're gonna, I assume this movie is probably gonna, again, have the people who liked the original movie see this, so it might do well. I don't know yet. So they might get a sequel. I don't know, honestly, and I don't know how they would even pull it off, because I don't know if they paid attention, but Jumba becomes a good guy at the end of the first movie. Whoops! They're gonna have to change all of that now. Anyway, this movie is just not good. It's quite frankly very embarrassing. And the little heart that it does have just doesn't shine enough. There's just not enough time to let things sit and shimmer. And it's odd, I heard about this. The movie's length is actually a little bit extended from the original animated movie. It's like, how? how did you even do that? How did you extend the time of the movie, but pace it so it feels like it's shorter than the original movie in that way, and that the heart's just fucking eviscerated? It's gone. Most of it is. There's so little of it left. You know, there are other bits that other reviewers talked about. Stitch revealing himself as this alien never happens in this movie. You know, we have the reveal, or, you know, hiding himself as the dog, quote unquote, but we don't get the reveal. And to me, that is another extension of just the amount of, like, corporatation that everyone else has pointed out. Everyone has pointed out, like, this is just, you know, corporate pandering 101. Stitch is very clearly a cute character. Again, I even pointed this out earlier. I admitted to all of you, you heard me say it, that Stitch should have been the face of Disney. You heard me say this. But you can't even pull that off in this movie. And they're too afraid to have Stitch reveal himself. Again, a huge character moment for Stitch. That should have been like this. If there was a scene to extend, it's that. It's scenes like this that are just now cut from the movie. All of them that just seem cut from the movie. You know, for all the shifts and changes. You know what they should have done? Here, I'm going to fix this movie for you. Ready? Instead of Captain Yantu, use another Stitch villain. You don't have to use Jumba. I'm sorry, but you don't. You have Hamsterville. He's this cute little hamster guy, right? Have him be the villain of this movie. We start there. So let me fix, you know, scene by scene. Let's fix this movie. Let's go back up, right? We're going to extend the time a little bit, right? So we have him in Space Stitches, and he's, you know, he does his funky little bits to get in trouble, and then we transition him nice and, you know, throughout the ship so we can get a good glimpse of what the ship actually, you know, is, and how things sort of connect and correlate to room to room to room to get us to the prison room, right? And then you have Stitch figure out, oh, you know, there's this way out. Gets his way out. You know, the opening, just extend it by a minute. You need just a minute to fix that opening, right? Give that a little transitional period of time, right? Add a minute there. Lilo feeding the fish, keep that all the same. You know, feeding the chickens, or freeing the chickens, all that stuff, fine. The fight with Myrtle, and the moments with Myrtle, I feel like Myrtle gets underplayed in this movie, obviously. You know, her and her crew, as it were, you know, I would reorient them to be a little bit closer to where they were in the original, where they're all the yes girls and all that stuff, and Myrtle's sort of like the head honcho. You know, I think that's a fun bit. So I'd stick true to what that is, instead of just a simple shove and the water not playing any effect. Is a little weird, but okay, fine, whatever. So none of that needs to be all that too altered at this juncture of the movie. So obviously I would remove the neighbor character. I don't think this neighbor character is needed. Give those parts back to Nani, first and foremost, and more importantly, is give Nani her character back. You know, that meaning her going with Lilo to the dog shelter, and, you know, have a scene where all the dogs are, you know, I mean, in animation, this, you know, it's a fun bit. I don't know how you would have fixed this in the movie, but, you know, you have Lilo walking in this adaptation, and she walks past all the scared dogs, and then sees Stitch. In the original, obviously, since it's animated, all the dogs are like hiding up in the banners, and Stitch is like the only one available, apparently. You know, and I don't know how I would reorient it to get it to that. I don't think that's necessary. I mean, it's a fun bit, but I mean, that one lends itself way too much to animation if we're being brutal and honest about all these things. Because all the other animals except the frog are CGI, I think. So yeah, we don't need Stitch having a color. I don't think he had a color in the original movie. I don't remember it. We cut the wedding scene. We have him just sneak straight into the kennel, because we don't need songs that we didn't have from the original movie here. We just cut the wedding scene. We have Stitch just super stealth his way, because having him be that sneaky alien is still the primary focus of, you know, us getting us there. And then having him get hit by the bus and being brought over. So, you know, if we're going to have it so that, you know, we're not changing too much from the movie, Pleakley and Jumbo will still use the human disguises. Obviously, I would change Jumbo's voice completely. I would have hired on someone who'd be willing to do more of a Russian accent, or a gruffer voice at the very bare minimum, and have that be Jumbo there. And fine, they can, you know, dress up as humans. That's, you know, fine enough. And so, when Lilo goes to get the dog, obviously, as I mentioned before, it's Nani. And I would keep this bit from the original movie, where they have her buy the dog. Because I think that having it transitional from that bit to the final bit is something that needs to remain consistent from the original movie, because I think that's a good comical bit mixed with the heart. And again, it's not one eating the other. They're complementing each other, because it was set up and paid off at the beginning, you know, earlier in the movie, and then paid off. That's how you write. That is how you write, and that is how you balance things. So again, I would go back to the original movie, and I would stick closer to the original movie here. It is probably around this time, though, that I would personally introduce our villain, our actual new villain, since we're script writing here, and that being Dr. Hamsterville. You know, the little hamster guy. Since he's smaller to CGI, it would be easier to CGI, since Stitch is already kind of small as it is. So you have this other small entity that is evil and just wants to make things hurt. So now we introduce him at this juncture of the movie, and he learns that, you know, the Federation is out for Stitch, and he's this other, you know, experimental guy. He's like what Jumbo could have become, sort of kind of character, is what I'm alluding to here. And that's how you would write this character to remain. So now you have Jumbo and Dr. Hamsterville can play off of each other, rather than Jumbo playing off of nothing, because he's the villain in this movie. So obviously, Jumbo and Pleakley begin their hunt, and it is around the dog capturing zone. So this is where Cobra is introduced, and for me, I mean, I would have probably had him be the agent and the family person too as well. I think having that undercover thing be at the start of the movie just gives him a little bit more to chew on, because there isn't too much in this movie for him to do, quite frankly. And, it bridges that duty versus caring aspect of Cobra from the original movie that I feel like is, again, missing here. And that's the part that I feel like in diverging the two characters feels a little unnecessary. So I would actually re-bridge these two characters back into one. Again, for script writing purposes. So, yeah. Jumba attaching the tracker, fine. He can still do that because they're still trying to, participate in capturing Stitch the right way at this juncture of the movie. And moving to the luau, I think having, again, as I mentioned in this review, having Stitch set the fire, I think is a finer job of having that whole thing unfold. Having Bleakley beginning his little light cross-dressing as the humanoid here. I mean, that's their compromise, and I'm fine with that. It's like, okay, fine, I get it. You wanted to save money and kind of be like, hey, you're doing the thing from the original. It's like, okay. But I mean, you didn't earn a lot of the other shit, though, so I'm not giving you too much credit there, so sorry. So we have Lilo trying to bathe Stitch before they arrive. A little unnecessary thing, but whatever. And then you have Stitch, messing around with the house, and because this is where he is brought into the house. He's given the little thing that calms him down immediately, which, in both versions just sort of calms him down immediately, which I think is a good comical break, regardless of which way you're looking at it. So I would actually keep that because it's just so bizarre. And then I would, you have Lilo teaching Stitch the song, the sad song, as I refer to it as, the heart song of this movie. I mean, in terms of giving something for these characters to do in this adaptation, I don't mind it, but at the same time, with him breaking the house, I think, again, utilizing these spots earlier to have her recognizing that what's going on is all of this breaking, and then having her immediately be like, okay, your badness level is here, as she does in the original movie. Again, they do it outside for some weird reason, instead of like immediately after all the chaos. It's like, okay, your levels are like here for someone so small, blah blah blah. So again, I would move it back to indoors and make it contextually the same space. And then, Bubbles, this is the juncture of the movie where Bubbles would go undercover. Obviously, in my rewrite, he would have already been undercover, but this time he goes undercover specifically as a, as the new like home separator person. That's what he uses to get back in close, as it were. And I would have the montage of when, Lilo and Stitch trying to find a job. Again, this is where a lot of that chaotic energy gets to shine, kind of, in this movie. But again, it's bizarrely rushed, and again, Stitch doesn't receive any punishment for it. Nani's just harangued, and they don't get any hooks. In particular, it comes down to the beach scene. That's where it all culminates. That is where the biggest shift in the entire movie needs to happen. something needs to break here. It has to. And it doesn't in the remake, obviously, but you need to bring it back. You need Lilo to finally be upset, at Stitch. Be like, you're just going back to chaos. Still, and it's too much. Word it however you need it to, but have the brother and sister rivalry actually clash. That's the point of the movie. The adopted brother and the biological sister clashing. That's the movie. It has to be in the movie. This movie doesn't need to exist as it stands because the core of the movie is gone. Again, as I suggested in my review, so you need to bring that part back. You cannot cut that from the movie. It is unacceptable. You're breaking the part that makes the core of the movie the core of the movie. Again, Stitch is, for all intents and purposes, the adopted brother of Lilo. For all intents and purposes, again, of relating this, even though he's a dog, he's a talking dog, so it's, again, equivalency, whatever. So, yeah, having Lilo argue with Stitch, giving Stitch a reason to leave in the first place, that core thing that is just gone. So, yeah, put that shit back in and extend it. Have it be a back and forth. Be like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be, or whatever Stitch says, and, have Lilo just lambast him, and it being deservingly so. Again, bring up both points. So, yeah. Now, when Lilo and Stitch gets back home, the lambasting continues in the original movie from Lilo to Stitch. And I resist, I do not resist in saying, keep that consistently going in the remake. And again, that's what would push Stitch to leave. It doesn't matter where he ends up. I don't care that he ends up in the kennel or in the forest. Either spot is irrelevant. What's relevant is why he leaves. That is what's missing. Why does Stitch leave? It's gone in this movie. There's no reason he leaves. And that is the core of the movie. The back and forth, the sibling rivalry of it all. The messiness, the chaotic, just absolute antithesis of it all. Being back and forth and it finally collapsing on itself. So yeah, it doesn't matter. Again, it doesn't matter where Stitch ends up. It matters how he ends up in that location that matters. So for whatever reason he ends up back in the kennel, fuck it. If we're gonna keep it to being there for whatever reason, it still needs that why. Why? Writers never forget to ask yourself why something is happening. That is one of the most important questions to consistently ask yourself. No matter everything. Always go back to why. Why is character doing X? Why is character doing Y? This is basic writing 101. If there is ever a message I want to come across in this 1 hour review, let it be this. The why is so crucial. It is what makes characters and character decisions matter. The why is what makes things matter. And it's all gone. So yeah, bring it the fuck back. because it makes the ending of the movie that much more satisfying to see how Lilo feels like she overpushed her boundaries of what she felt like she needed to say to Stitch, and for Stitch to finally feel that guilt and feel that responsibility. And now when Stitch says, I want to say goodbye to the Grand Master, that means something now. That recognition, it means that much more of everything. It actually carries meaning now. It just is. It's not just in this vacuum of like, that line was in the original, so we gotta put it here. Now it regains its purpose. That's the power of writing, is purpose. You have to have purpose behind your lines. It's essential if you want to be a good writer, right? Again, finding that purpose, or refinding it in this case. Why is Stitch saying goodbye so impactful in the original? I want to say goodbye because it's also kind of an apology without saying I'm sorry. That's why. That's why that line means everything. That is why that ending means what it means. And then, if you have the bit from the, Stitch being properly bought, you can mix the comedy that you set up earlier with the heart of the why, and you have your fucking finale where it's not, Jumba being thrown into space, it's Hamsterville, because now you set him up and you toss him wherever, and that's where he was in the sequel anyway, so that's where he needs to be anyways. See? You had a villain, and I don't know why you made it Jumba of all things. That doesn't make any sense. So yeah, 3 out of 10, 2 out of 10. Like, this is such a terrible remake. I hope that people watch this review and take away what is needed to be taken away for this long one. But if you ended up enjoying this rant, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers. Second, to my PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel directly. And third, to my Discord server, you can join, collab, chill for free. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye!